The fog in Black Hollow never truly lifted. It clung to the streets, wrapped around the houses, and crept beneath doors like a silent intruder. At night, it was worse. Whispers rode the mist, soft as breath against glass. Shadows stretched where no light should reach. And the mirrors never quite reflected what they should. No one spoke of the disappearances. No one questioned the empty houses. But if you stood too long in front of a mirror, if you listened too closely to the whispers, you might see them, the hollow ones. And once you see them, they never stop watching. The town of Black Hollow lay in the valley, surrounded by dense, ancient woods that breathed with the weight of old secrets. A cold mist rolled in each evening, swallowing the narrow streets and turning gaslights into ghostly orbs. Lillian Graves arrived just as dusk bled into night. She had inherited an old manor on the outskirts, a relic of her estranged uncle's estate. The house had stood there for over 2 centuries, its foundations steeped in shadow and whispers. As she stepped onto the creaking porch, the fog seemed to part, revealing a house that loomed like a waiting predator. The windows were dark, like vacant eyes watching her every move. A strange sensation curled in her gut, an unease that had no name. Inside, dust and decay clung to the air. Her footsteps echoed in the emptiness. The house had been left untouched for years, yet something about it felt lived in. As she moved through the corridors, the walls seemed to shift, exhaling a breath of their own. Then, she heard it. A whisper, so faint it could have been the wind. But there was no wind. Only the heavy silence of the house, and the mist curling against the glass outside. That night, Lillian dreamt of the forest. She was running barefoot through the gnarled trees, their branches reaching for her like skeletal fingers. Behind her, something moved. Not footsteps, something else. A slithering presence, whispering her name. She awoke gasping, drenched in sweat. The room was dark, save for the silvery moonlight filtering through the lace curtains. But something was wrong. The mirror across from her bed reflected not her sleeping form, but something else. A shadow stood in the doorway. Lillian froze. The air turned thick, pressing against her lungs. The shape in the mirror remained still, its form barely distinguishable. And then, slowly, it turned its head. But when she whipped around, the doorway was empty. The night stretched on in suffocating silence. The house no longer felt abandoned. Something was here with her, watching, waiting. The following days were filled with strange occurrences. Scratching sounds in the walls, faint whispers when she walked past certain rooms, doors locking on their own. Determined to understand what haunted the house, Lillian searched through her uncle's old journals. What she found made her blood run cold. The hollow ones live between the walls. They wear the faces of the dead, but they are not them. They wait for those who listen. They wait for those who believe. The final entry was smudged, but the last words were clear. Never listen to the whispers. That night, as she lay in bed, the whispering returned. Only this time, it came from inside her room. The house was consuming her. Each night, the whispers grew louder. They called her name, their voices hollow and stretched, as if spoken through water. The walls pulsed as she walked past them, like something beneath was breathing. The mirrors no longer reflected her properly. Her image would lag, or her mouth would move when she had not spoken. Lillian knew she had to leave. But as she packed her things, the house groaned. The doors slammed shut, the windows fogged over. And in the reflection of the glass, the hollow ones gathered. Their faces were stolen from those long dead. Their eyes were black voids, stretching into endless nothingness. They grinned, though their mouths did not move. "We have been waiting," they whispered in unison. Then the lights went out. Lillian tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat. The figures moved closer, their hollow voices filling the air. "You are home now." Her vision swam. The walls pulsed like living flesh. Hands, Too many hands stretched from the darkness, reaching for her. She fought against them, but the house was no longer just a house. It was something alive, something ancient. And then, she felt herself slipping. Her reflection in the mirror didn't match her movements. It grinned when she did not. She was being swallowed. She was becoming one of them. Days later, the town of Black Hollow remained as silent as ever. No one questioned why the old manor's windows were now filled with shadows. No one questioned the whispers that rode the evening mist, and no one ever saw Lillian Graves again. But some nights, if one were to peer into the old mirror that still stood in the manor's front hall, they might see a woman staring back. Not moving, not speaking, just smiling, waiting. Would you listen if they called your name? Black Hollow moved on as if nothing had changed. The townsfolk were used to disappearances. People who came, lingered, and faded into memory, leaving only their empty houses behind. But something was different this time. It started with the mirrors. Mrs. Thorne, the town's seamstress, was the first to notice. One evening, as she closed her shop, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror by the door. Only, it wasn't her. Her reflection stood still while she moved, its eyes darker than they should have been. She turned away, willing her heart to slow, but the sensation of being watched pressed against her skin. When she looked again, the reflection was back to normal, almost. The corners of its mouth curled ever so slightly upward. By the next morning, Mrs. Thorne had boarded up every mirror in her shop. The mist in Black Hollow had always been thick, rolling in from the woods each evening like a living thing. But now, it never truly lifted. Children whispered about figures standing just beyond sight, barely visible in the haze. Pale, unmoving, their faces indistinct. The baker's apprentice swore he saw someone standing outside his window one night, watching. But when he stepped closer, there was nothing. Only the fog, pressing against the glass like a breathing thing. The next morning, he didn't open the shop. By the time they broke down his door, his room was empty. The only sign he had ever been there was his reflection in the mirror, lingering, staring out, even when no one else was there. The manor at the edge of town stood in silence, its doors locked, its windows black with dust and time. No one went near it. No one spoke of it. But some nights, light flickered inside. A single candle, moving from room to room, as if carried by an unseen hand. No one claimed to live there. No one had entered since Lillian Graves had disappeared. Yet the house was never empty. Late at night, when the town had gone still, a low creaking echoed from its walls, like something shifting, stretching, breathing, as if it were waiting for the next name to whisper. The hollow ones were no longer bound to the house. The whispers seeped through the town, curling in the alleys and clinging to the walls of quiet homes. People began vanishing. Not all at once. Not in ways that left behind blood or broken doors. Just gone. The only traces were the mirrors. Each time someone disappeared, their reflection lingered a little too long. Watching, smiling. The town knew. They always knew. But they never spoke of it. Never looked too long into the glass. Never listened to the whispers. Black Hollow remains. The mist still comes. The hollow ones still watch. And if you listen closely, when the fog is thick and the night is silent, you might hear them calling your name. Would you answer? Would you listen? Or would you be next? The hollow ones remain, and they are waiting. The town of Black Hollow still stands, swallowed by mist and silence. Its streets remain empty, its windows dark, but the whispers never fade. Some say the hollow ones are still there, waiting in the fog, watching through the mirrors. Not alive, not dead, just echoes of those who listened. And if you ever find yourself alone in a quiet town where the air is thick and the shadows move just out of sight, stop. Do not listen. Do not look into the glass. Because once you see them, they see you too.